Okay, guys, part 3.
Here we see the thesis. Ronson applies a more and more comfortable use of the psychopath test. He gains experience with it in order to explore the preconceptions of mental health professionals about psychopaths, the effect of their professional decisions on people and society. Now I'm going to move from that thesis to a rough outline, which begins here with speaker. In chapter 2, the speaker is confused. Tony really is a mystery and Ronson casts about for ways to figure out what's going on with Tony. In chapter 4, he's a skeptic. And on the second page, chapter 4, this becomes really clear, in part because of the details of chapter 3, the bizarre story of LSD and psychopaths, really not very flattering to psychologists. Then as he begins to apply the test in chapter 4, he gains confidence, thinks about using it on his enemies, and considers the impact on society of such things. Chapter 5, of course, he really becomes quite comfortable in using the test as he deals with Toto. In chapter 6, he begins to be just a bit afraid of the impact of all of this, and has doubt begin to sneak in to the equation. So that would be my first paragraph. The second paragraph focuses on examples of Tony, sort of this common criminal. He's a liar, and he is quite violent in the eyes of course, some. That's one way that we think of psychopaths. Toto, of course, is the death squad leader. We've got his history and, of course, his little figurine army. What do you think, again, as the audience here, as we think about Toto, his fake crying, this bizarre behavior? Al Dunlap, his history, these statues, and the smart crack that Ronson makes be sure to write about Narnia. He's really sort of having fun with this. And he does this to make this point in chapter 6, page 174 to 177, to be boring. True malevolent power is boring. You don't get caught. You don't stand out. So stand out where? In the cultural context. Stand out in our preconceptions of the psychopath. Of course, Bob and the test casts a really clear view on psychopaths. What do we think about that? How does that fit within the cultural context? Generally, do we trust? Who do we trust? Why do we trust them? What do we know to be true? One thing to consider is, what do we find surprising? In our own cultural context, which is what we take for granted. Who are the psychopaths? Are they the violent? Are they the liars? The death squad leaders? Is it Wall Street? He approaches this at the end of chapter 4. We can think about this in the cultural context of the times. The economic collapse. Is real evil normal? Is it boring even? Psychopaths have broken amygdalas. What's our problem? Right? And ultimately, what are we being convinced of here as the speaker ponders these larger questions? So now I've really worked my way into some of the major questions of the text. I have to say, I don't know. I think that I find the purpose to be persuasive, and as I look at the details, I'm thinking that maybe I need to revisit the thesis statement and make some changes. I mean, does this really match up with the thesis that I've written? We've got these details of speaker which start off going in that direction, but it's not so much about psychiatrists and psychopaths. It seems to have an awful lot more to do with the way we, the audience, see psychopaths and the experience of psychopaths in society and society with psychopaths. Something is changing in the way I see this. So as we look then at this thesis, more and more comfortable use of the test. Well, he certainly uses it. That's important. And he gains experience with it, but the last part down here, I'm thinking maybe we need to change. I mean, first of all, the speaker undergoes this change, and that's part of the reason why my mindset is changing. So, why? Do I trust him? If so, what is at work? Really, something's going on down here with what's going on in the cultural context, the situation. So I think about it, and this is in fact the thesis I think that I'm going to work with. John Ronson develops a trustworthy speaker in the psychopath test through humor and exposing the development of knowledge via the use of the test in order to question audience assumptions about evil. What is evil? I believe, that the speaker is likable. The speaker is trustworthy. He seems to know what he's talking about. As he gets surprised, as he is shocked, as he is learning, we are surprised, we are shocked, we are learning. I'm going to go into the examples in text and really lean on these in order to prove this idea down here. It's all there. So this is the revised thesis, and I think it's going to work. In particular, this major thematic communicative purpose down here, really questioning our assumptions about good, bad, what we know to be true about those things. And I think that I can write about that, and I can use my outline, because really it fits with this better than the original outline. So that's my process, but how does it help you if this isn't making sense right now? Well, let's go to the IB language and literature outcomes. We can take a look at number 1. Analyze how audience and purpose affect the structure and content of text. Well, that's all we're talking about here. Structure and content. Audience preconceptions. Purpose. What are the preconceptions about the subject? Which ones do the speakers share? How does this change as the book goes forward? What do we learn about the subject and purpose as a result? If you can answer some of these questions, I think you can find things to write about. They're not. I don't want you to write about my ideas. I want you to write about your ideas. You're going to need to demonstrate an awareness of how language and meaning are shaped by culture and context, right? In what ways do jargon and professional language get used? How does the language of the psychopath test reflect culture? Maybe it's a professional culture. What is the impact of context on the application of the text? We talked about this with Tony. The context of Bedlam or Broadmoor. This is something that I think you can really write about. Think about the difference between Al Dunlap, the context of this mansion, with these weird statues, but of course still powerful man, wealthy man, successful man. How does context affect the application of the test? Also, or Toto as well. How does language affirm identity? Again, we're aware of the test. How do we use it? What's the interaction with other people's identities? Think about Dunlap's reaction. Finally, these, points down here are the major points. Language and the individual, language and power, language and knowledge, language and social relations, relationships between people. Things to think about. Maybe you find something here you can plug into if the other bit isn't working. Go to the soapstone again. Go to the text. Find the details. Come back here and say, what works for me? How can I use this to make something of value? Again, these ideas are here for you. Something to think about. I think they all fit. I could write about this based on our thesis, and I hope you can too. Good luck.